The latest EV sales and registration figures are released for April 2025, and while ICE crashes, EVs surge. We discover a new initiative in cheaper EV public charging set to shake up the industry. The UK Automated Vehicles Act already has a steady stream of applications, and we learn that the FSD cars must take a driving test. While we select the good, the bad and the ugly, viewer comments, we'll provide a rapid roundup of UK EV public charging prices and reveal the progress of the Fantasy EV virtual stock portfolio. We often get the idea that the UK car industry is just an assembly line for a few cars made by others, like the Japanese, and our manufacturing days are well in the past. But far from it. Nissan, Jaguar Land Rover, Mini, they all manufacture in the UK. Manufacturing is still a very large industry, but it is suffering the classic pressures from the transition of cars from ICE to EVs, and lately the current tariff nightmare. In better times, the transition to EVs alone would be hard work, but Trump has just complicated the entire world economy, and the legacy motor industry seems to be amongst the worst hit. Well, let's look at the figures and see what we can learn. Well, the UK market is down 10.4% year on year, with this fall in April making falls in the last 6 out of 7 months. April is normally a quieter time anyhow, following the change of the number plates in March, and this year it's made even worse by the arrival of new VED rates for EVs, we now pay for the first time, and the expensive car tax arrival on April the 1st. As a full overview, April 2025 figures we see today are not yet back up to where they were pre-pandemic, April 2019, and that's a worrying trend. The expected pent-up demand caused by factories closing during the pandemic lockdowns never actually happened, and the signs are there for that to now be a permanent change. Gone are the heady days of increasing sales every year with record profits and a rosy future. And EVs cannot be blamed for that. The arrival of true EVs in mass production only began in 2019 with the arrival of the Tesla Model 3. The decline had begun 3 years earlier. Mass-produced EVs arrived on the scene mid-pandemic at a time when ICE sales were already at rock bottom anyhow, hitting a 28-year low in 2020. 28 years, nothing to do with EVs. EV sales surged and immediately started setting new sales records. However, in context, they only sold 108,000 vehicles out of a total market of 1.6 million that year. So no, they didn't cause the crash in ICE sales. That continues to this day. Petrol car registrations shrank in April 2025 by a massive 22% year on year, down to 58,733 units and falling under 50% market share. Diesel was much worse, a drop of 26.2%, leaving them a tiny 5.3% of the market. HEVs, those that are not classed as EVs because they cannot be charged with a plug, saw a smaller slump with 2.9% loss. Holding up the market are the electric vehicles. Now, I personally feel that PHEVs are the biggest con the industry has ever foisted on an innocent motoring public. Jim Farley recently stated that we have a public that are very uneducated. He follows that up with, well, we can build all the vehicles we want, we can eventually make them profitable, but at the end of the day, people just don't understand how to handle the charging experience, how the vehicle will perform, real-world range in the cold, and towing. End of quote. The vast majority of PHEVs are just run 100% of the time on petrol, and many have never, ever had their batteries fully charged, let alone used. But the SMMT, Society of Motor Manufacturers and Traders, treats them as EVs, so plug-in hybrid electric vehicles saw their customary 34.1% rise, and true BEVs grew by 8.1%. That makes year-to-date PHEVs growth 27.7%, BEVs 35.2%. While they peaked at 20.4% of vehicle registrations, that did fall short of the target for 2025, which is 28%. The government now offers generous allowances to be able to include other types of vehicles and any future sales towards that target, and also the penalties for not reaching it are drastically reduced. But if you mix that together with the tariff nightmare, many auto manufacturers will just be really pleased if they get to the end of the year still solvent. All registrations across the board in April are down by 10.4% and year to date by a somewhat better 3.1%. There are now a total of 130 new EVs for sale, and prices are at last right across the board. Dasher Spring and Leap Motor T03 start at the bottom end, with models brand new under £15,000, while the small run-round market in the ever-popular mid-range of £20,000 to £30,000 is looking almost overstocked. Citroën EC3, Renault 5e, Fiat Grand Panda, Vauxhall Frontera, Hyundai Insta, Ford Puma, to name just a few. Prices in the larger family car range are equally well represented, like the MGS5, Hyundai Ioniq 5, VW ID4. It's still a surprising number of EVs at a list price at just over £40,000. And when I say just over, I mean literally just over, less than £1,000 over, because with the arrival of the expensive car tax, makes no sense. The Ford Capri now starts at £41,000, while the Ioniq 5 starts at £39,000. Does nobody spot these things, or is it they just don't care? The big worry, though, is the UK new car sales for April and pretty much any month between 2009 and today. They're roughly the same in 2024 as they were 15 years previously, 2009. The peak was reached in 2016, and the trend has been downhill all the way ever since. Only electric is holding up its own. And while previously the ICE version was always significantly cheaper, therefore grabbing buyers that just couldn't or wouldn't stretch to an EV, that's now evened out. The Ford Puma petrol is $27,000, while the all-new electric version starts at $29,995. Well, there's not too much hope going around at present, and no simple answer to tackling the tariffs. While some manufacturers are making bold claims about switching the manufacturing to the States, like VW and Audi, time will tell how many of these are just paying lip service and homage to the mighty Trump. Factories cannot be changed overnight from assembly to manufacturing, and even if they could, the supply chain for parts, they're now truly global, so tariffs will still apply. The most US cars ever made are the Teslas, and they hit 85% US-made components. And even they will be hit by tariffs, although not by much this year. They do get a temporary reprieve from the full assault. Many legacy auto just bury their heads in the sand, slip back to making PHEVs and, just go the whole log to ICE and hope all will be well. Some, like Porsche and Toyota, think the ICE petrol car still has many, many years left to run. Well, the ICE era was already ending when EVs and the pandemic arrived on the scene, and Trump seems to be determined to finish it all off altogether. Right or wrong, he's made decisions that affect ICE manufacturing far more than EV manufacturing in the States. Tesla's reported to have a tariff liability this year of something under $1,000 a car, while Ford and GM are claiming they're going to be hit between $3,000 and $6,000. Most of their stuff's made in Mexico or Canada. And since legacy make gross profits less than these figures, they face a difficult choice. So for legacy industry, they can spend money they haven't got to shift manufacturing back to the US. They can raise prices at a time they can't even sell enough at the current lower prices, or they can just absorb the tariffs and hope to sell enough to cover the hit. We in the UK, we're not affected by tariffs in the same way, and we can and do import much cheaper EVs from China. It's such a shame that we then add higher taxes and duty to make our cars some of the dearest in Europe, but nowhere near as bad as they're finding things over in the US. Well, the first fully self-driving autonomous lorry, or semi as they call them in the States, has now arrived. No, it's not who you think. See, Tesla does have what they call the semi, and that will become a world beater as production ramps up this year, aiming for 50,000 a year. But they're not yet run in fully autonomous mode. They have a driver on standby, supervised full self-driving, so they don't count. Others like Kodiak operate genuine driverless lorries, no human in the cab or anyone monitoring progress remotely, but they only ever use those on fully private roads. See, that first honour goes to Aurora. Previously, they also ran just one lorry, no driver, on private roads, and this year they've launched it onto the public roads. Still just a single vehicle, but still the first. Well done, Aurora. But here the ultimate prize would appear to be already determined. You see, one or two true driverless lorries is not a market, and Aurora and many others are now struggling to raise the capital needed to build the first factory that is needed to try to get from handmade vehicles into full mass production. Money is currently flowing in. There are investors, but that's a very different thing to getting into profitability as they reach mass production. We saw exactly this with EV cars, and look at how many have fallen by the wayside on that journey. Aurora has the prize for being the first. I wish them all the success in the world, but I have to face it, they might get no further. One opposite approach has been taken by Tesla in both lorries and cars. Despite virtually inventing the phrase full self-driving, they still don't do it nor claim to do it. Their FSD is stated to be supervised FSD. You need a driver who takes overall responsibility. Instead, they give us delay after delay and let all the others take the credit, while media and customers alike fall into believing, this is never going to happen. Well, they're working way behind the scenes. See, first they build and test the concept, then when the time is right for Tesla, they build the factories. Then they get into mass production, all while building out the charging infrastructure they will need. See, for semis, they can't use the existing ones, or they haven't got the time. Tesla 1.2 megawatt megachargers are now being installed, and more than 40 are likely in the US this year and next. They know that companies will not buy lorries if they have nowhere to charge them quickly and cheaply, and the requirement to charge a fleet of lorries in terms of power in a remarkably short time is absolutely huge. They do have an advantage in that, unlike cars, these lorries generally follow the main roads and the highways, so charger locations are much easier to predict and build. Tesla has had a number of fully electric lorries operating with Pepsi and others, plus they use them themselves to deliver the new cars. And they have an absolute mass of data that other companies just don't have. To date, none of them is operating in full self-driving on public roads, despite the software being installed. There's always a driver. Off the public roads, full self-drive is already in use. However, Tesla has a secret up its sleeves. It does operate software secretly in the background while they're driving. It's called shadow mode. Although the drivers of the semis do not operate the full self-driving, the semis themselves can and do. It runs very quietly in the background on every single trip. It makes every single decision it needs to operate fully autonomously, but instead of then using that to turn the steering wheel or press the pedals, it sends every single decision direct to the computer to compare what it decided to do compared to what the driver actually did. And it does this thousands and thousands of times every single trip. With FSD, it makes little difference, car or semi, apart from the size of the vehicle. So the billions of miles of shadow mode in millions of EVs over the last 10 years can instantly be equally applied to the semi. It already knows how to drive, just needs to adapt to the vehicle's size and performance. So full self-drive is the least of the tasks they face. The main one now is the new factory, which is nearing completion, ready to go into mass production later this year with a target of 50,000 units per year. Now, while this is a long way short of 2 million EV cars, each unit is worth at least 10 cars in turnover and profit, and the megacharger network will be a genuine money machine in its own right. I have to say it has been a very long time coming, but does anyone out there predict that when it happens, it won't be huge? Well, here in the UK, we're progressing nicely, believe it or not, and with our fully autonomous vehicles, we're actually well up there with the leaders anywhere in the world. The new law passed last year, the Autonomous Vehicles Act, and included in the King's Speech this year, threw up some surprising bits of information. First is the revelation that the UK government sets the standard for AVs. These are autonomous vehicles now, not EVs, AVs, but they are still EVs. The standard is you've got to be better than the most careful human driver. Not perfect, no one expects that, but just much better than humans. If they reduce accidents by even half, that'll make us probably the safest motoring country in the world. Second revelation is that any and all tests or trials of mileage achieved with the driver in the car just don't count. So all those cars already under trial, like in Oxford and London, and all the Teslas must sooner or later come to an end, and the fully self-driving test trials and mileage must begin. But before they do, the EVs will need to take a driving test. Yeah, they must be put through a driving test, exactly the same as us drivers, and they must pass. If one passes, and it turns out it's a one-off hand-built EV, only that exact one can take to the roads. But if the car or lorry that passes is mass-produced, then all other AVs built using the same design and technology instantly becomes authorised for full self-driving on the UK roads. It'd be fascinating to find out which AVs are being put in for their driving tests, or which, if any, have already passed. The Department for Transport has confirmed only that there have been a number of applications to get permission to operate autonomous driverless vehicles, AVs, and presumably apply to take their tests. But the companies applying and the outcomes, well, they're closely guarded secrets. With a much needed boost to the UK manufacturing industry, Jaguar has partnered with several companies, including Nvidia and Waymo, to produce several thousand more premium autonomous vehicles, like they run in the States. These could end up here. It looks like a genuine race to be the first country to get the first fully autonomous EVs or AVs on the roads on a daily commercial basis. Now, just before we explore this, let me just reject all the negative comments this will throw up from the usual sources. Most of them are utterly puerile, as if the billions spent so far have just, overlooked or forgotten things like it won't work, how to charge them, how to clean them, can the driver get done if the AV speeds, and how to take over in an emergency. But the key one of these is how to stop idiots from trying to or being able to take over. This is serious. In the UK, the law states that the car must operate totally without human interference, either in the car or remotely anywhere outside. In this way, the issues of legal liability and insurance are fully covered by the manufacturer or operator. So if the passenger cannot take over, ever, then any traffic offences like speeding and any accidents cannot possibly be the fault of the driver. The driver, you see, will no longer be a driver, just a passenger, as if it was in a taxi. And no taxi passenger ever gets done for speeding. So the AVs must be absolutely idiot-proof because some of the passengers will be idiots. And that's going to raise some challenges, as all existing Tesla and all Waymos using the Jaguar I-Pace have steering wheels and pedals. How are they going to be disabled? In the early days of fully autonomous EVs or AVs, it will be a bit like the Wild West, where anything goes, and things they thought would never happen, happen. But regulations and laws will respond. Now, many will try, many will fail, and many will go bust. While Waymo is out in the lead at the moment and they're ramping up to make a few more thousand taxis, it's an expensive business. You start with a Jaguar I-Pace, that's not exactly a cheap car. Then you have to adapt it by adding dozens of sensors, including radar, ultrasonic, LiDAR, cameras, GPS, and many others. They're not cheap either. It ends up an amazing expensive AV. And it's still heavily ring-fenced. It can only ever drive inside a fixed area that has been extensively and repeatedly mapped, a process that requires to be repeated ad nauseum. The main competitor is Tesla, and they have two massive advantages. First, every single car they've ever made since 2017 is already fully capable of driving autonomously. You don't need to convert them. You don't need to add any sensors. Everything you need is already there. So every one of the 5 million existing EVs is already an AV and it's equipped and waiting to go. It only needs the software activating to make it work. Second, the Tesla system is true self-driving in that you could fly a Tesla Model 3 out to any country, anywhere in the world, place it on a road anywhere in that country. It would instantly know where it was, GPS, and it would have all the rules and regulations sorted, like which side of the road you drive on, what's the speed limit. You can tell it any legitimate address and it can take you there. Well, just as easily as you following a sat-nav to a place that you have never been before. Only this time it will be much safer. Well, for one, I'm looking forward to full self-drive in the UK. I'm old, and at some point in the foreseeable future, my driving skills are likely to become a hazard, my reactions will slow down and my eyesight will deteriorate further until I should no longer be allowed to drive on the roads. Wouldn't it be great if at that point I can order full self-driving on my Tesla and just sit back while the car drives me? Might have to rename my car to Miss Daisy. But seriously, that would allow me to be totally mobile and self-sufficient for far longer. Then as a bonus, if I'm not using my car, I could log it into the Tesla app as a robotaxi, and I could then even supplement my pension when we split the fares. The EV charging scene is one of constant change. First, there are not enough, nowhere to charge. Now we have 24, 32 and 44 bay hubs that aren't getting used and lie deserted despite price slashing. And we come back to Jim Farley and his uneducated motorists. When we went from a desktop computer with a mouse, keyboard, monitor, hardwired printer, hardwired internet connection, to a handheld tablet, no keyboard, no mouse, no separate screen, connected to the internet and printer wirelessly, we adapted. There wasn't a campaign raised to bring back the mouse, let's have a wired printer, where do I plug it in? Anyone who wanted a mouse just stuck with the desktops. But very quickly we adapted and we found the new technology was better for the majority of the people, for the majority of the time, for the majority of the tasks we used them for. For the rest, they still had the desktops. Yeah, for some specific tasks like my video editing, I still use a desktop, but most of my time with a computer is now using a smartphone or a tablet. Well, EVs followed a very different route as the industry and media with vested interests fought back and tried to destroy the entire EV world. The innocent public got caught in the middle and swallowed the hype and started demanding that the newfangled EVs be built and operated exactly like the old petrol car they were replacing that they'd driven for years. For many people, they wanted zero conversion, zero change. And I, in my travels, have interviewed many of these. It is scary, some of them. Well, if previously they filled up once a week, taking 5 minutes in a petrol station on the way home from work on a Thursday, that is exactly what they expected their EV to do, to be able to fill up once a week on the way home from work on a Thursday in less than 5 minutes. But they don't. But I often find I arrive at a supercharger in peak time and find it totally deserted, as we did in South Mims recently on the M25. I'm told that one's always busy. I found about 6 cars there. Now, other times I go off-peak and I find it very busy. So Tesla is now trialling live price adjusting based on the actual live occupancy of the supercharger, not the time of day. If you go to a deserted charger at peak time and find it empty, you'll be charged the off-peak rate. Go to a very busy charger off-peak and the price will be at the peak rate. Oh, by the way, now they've already said they'll operate a I've started so I'll finish policy. So if you start charging at one rate, they will not change it if the tariff then changes mid-charge. So how are we going to know about this? Well, Tesla owners already get all the information they need. To display the price at that exact moment in time is not much of a challenge. Well, if this trial works, then when you program in the supercharger destination, you'll be able to see how busy it is and how much it will cost to charge there. It's really simple. If it's full and there's a queue, price will be high. If it's deserted, it'll be cheaper. But will it work? That returns us to our understanding our EVs. Far too many people wait until the battery is in the orange or even the red before they think about charging. And that's because they used to wait until their petrol tank was almost empty before thinking about filling it up full of petrol. These people arrive at superchargers and they have no choice but to charge there, as they don't have enough battery left to get them anywhere else, certainly not the next one. Why? Why do they do that to themselves? Some people will never learn, but one trend I've seen looks to be ending. See, as the computer takes over EVs, more and more of the functions, we need less and less information. Do we need a temperature gauge? No. Or an oil pressure gauge or a rev counter even. So in the 60s and 70s, this reached such a stupid, ridiculous state where there are dozens of gauges all over the dashboard. Most of them we didn't even know what they did. Vacuum gauges. All we really want to know is, can we drive it safely? What temperature is correct? Most of us know. Is it okay if it rises a few degrees? We don't know. All we need is a big red light. If it's off, you can drive. If it's on, don't drive. We don't need to know by how much the temperature's wrong if it's not safe to drive. Well, in the early days of EVs, manufacturers simply copied what they used to do with ICE. You got gauges, dials, everything. More than one gave you a physical key that you inserted and then gave you a button that you had to push that says start. Well, by the way, it doesn't start. Well, slowly the industry is facing reality. For the vast majority of EV drivers, we don't want a button to push to start. And in fact, we don't even want a key. Program your mobile phone and you have all you need. You carry that with you at all times. As you approach the car, it unlocks. With some of them, the handles are recessed, they'll pop out. Sit on the seat, car senses you and turns on. Press the brake pedal to tell it that you're ready to drive, and it will then select the right gear for you. Well, a recent trip to the Everything Electric show reveals that the number of knob switches, dials, buttons is now down at rock bottom. EVs are not ICE cars, and filling an EV with electricity is not like filling a petrol car with petrol. I'm keen to see if we EV drivers respond, but well done to Tesla for trying. EV public charging prices are in total turmoil these days. Right at the very top end, you've got the oil giants and the private equity fund-owned chargers. And they're raising prices once again because, well, they can. They don't care. The supermarkets are now busy installing their own chargers and, like they did with petrol pumps, they are undercutting the oil giants. Look at Sainsbury's. Tesla remains right down at the bottom end of the pricing, but a new breed is now on the scene. The renewable energy giants are taking on the oil giants. Now, it's common sense. If you own a wind farm or a solar farm, why not just add your own EV charger? That wind or solar farm sells electricity to the grid at wholesale prices, and it makes a very tidy profit doing so. Well, what if you add ultra-rapid EV chargers which buy that electricity not from the grid, these aren't grid connected, but direct from the wind or solar farm? You see, the farm doesn't really mind who they sell it to if they're going to get the same price. But the chargers definitely do, and they will notice a simply massive difference if they can buy electricity at wholesale prices, as the first of these that I'm aware of opens for business. Current wholesale prices in the UK hover between about 6p and 15 pence per kilowatt hour, say an average of 9p. Even adding 20% VAT, that gives you a cost of 11p, and all of the grid-connected EV chargers or CPOs would kill to be able to buy electricity at 11p. They would. AW Energy has done this, and it is selling their ultra-rapid EV charging for 39 pence per kilowatt hour. Well, obviously, 11p, 39p, they have the cost of the installation. They're not cheap. They also have maintenance, servicing, replacement, and they have to make a profit. EV motorists will be delighted to find these popping up around the country, especially for those that cannot charge at home. 39p represents less than 10p a mile if you can't charge at home, which is exactly the same as 60 miles per gallon in a petrol car. Well, I hope to bring you more news on AWNG soon because there's a lot more going on, but please, can we have more off-grid EV public chargers? Okay, viewer comments. The good comments are winning through this week, but I was struck with that from viewer MRA9085. Thanks for your contribution. So much of the effort goes into the cost of charging, the cost of running versus ICE, that we often overlook the other reasons why people choose to drive an EV. News headlines recently paint a dismal picture for the climate, global warming and pollution. And far from heading towards net zero and zero pollution, we're making things worse. While global warming and climate change are still being debated by some, the air pollution is a killer. It's here right now. We exceed safe levels of pollutants on a regular basis and seem to be waiting for some sort of sword of Damocles moment in time before we say, oh, okay, enough is enough, we're going to have to do something. We've got wind, solar, tidal and wave power, and they all offer almost unlimited clean green electricity with zero pollution. It is a disgrace more is not being done. Now we turn to the bad, and we're going to go to the Volvo driver 2811 and a carefully but fatally flawed calculation. With zero evidence or references, the figure of 25 to 35% is touted as the limit for EVs. After that, nobody's going to buy them. They are dismissed as uneconomical and not sustainable. Yet the most profitable auto company in the world is Tesla, and they make only EVs. How do people reach these conclusions? Do they calculate them themselves on pure guesswork? I think that's about right. Yeah. Or do they read the rantings of other people who've done the same? Well, unless there's an almost immediate total collapse of EVs, that stated figure is going to be exceeded within the next 2 years. In some region of the world, ICE will never disappear, but the days of ICE dominance, that's already ended. Well, the ugly comes from people who, well, they claim to be EV supporters, very supportive of the industry, used to have one, but now they've turned very negative. I recognise these tactics. This is when we used to know someone who said, well, some of my friends are coloured, so I'm not racist, but... Well, here we have someone saying they work away from home for 5 days a week. They do 50,000 miles a year, state that his car range is 2 to 230 miles. All okay so far. But then the argument stops making sense. He states he has to charge twice a day, queue up each time, and can only charge 20% to 80%. Well, these are common claims that they're ridiculous. They just don't add up. I'm just going to destroy this claim before I reveal what I actually used to do, because I used to drive 30 or 40 miles a year, and I used to work away from home, stay in hotels. So I am what he describes. 20% of battery to 80% is 60%. And if the range is 200 miles, that gives you a 120 mile range, sticking within that 20 to 80%. So if he tops up 120 miles twice a day, 5 days a week, he's going to put in 1,200 miles. Yeah, he only drives 1,000. That's clearly impossible. So the argument's busted, but what did I do? Well, I would stay at hotels that had charging there or very close by. So I charged overnight to 80%. That's it, 80%. That gave me about 120 mile range, just take it down to 20%, but I only needed enough to get me back to my hotel that night. So sometime during the day, when it was quiet, when the chargers were empty, I'd stop for a toilet break, a coffee, or a lunch, and in about 15 minutes, I could add over 100 miles, and that was enough to let me finish off my day's work and get back to the hotel. I never queued. Each day I arrived back at the hotel almost empty. I find it hard to believe that someone who claims to spend 5 days a week away from home for several years did not have the sense to look for a different method of charging. All the focus on the news this week has been focused on FSD, and the master behind much of the tech is NVIDIA. If any company cracks full self-driving and brings it to the market, their shares are likely to rise. With repeated delays seemingly coming to an end, I feel the time is right now to invest in NVIDIA. So in their case, I'm putting in a $1,000 stake. Portfolio is, as usual, up and down, but at this early stage, it's totally irrelevant. The reason I chose these is for the longer term, about a year, and those reasons have not changed. I'll be back with more insight next week. I'm Dave.